Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I'm the co-director of Universal News Frontier, and I am so glad you pulled up a chair to the kitchen table today, because we are breaking down a massive political earthquake happening right now in the nation's most populous state. We're looking at the 2026 California governor's race, and let me tell you, it is anything but business as usual. This race, it's literally rewriting the political playbook right before our eyes.
Let's jump right into this. Just look at this quote. California is 1 week away from an election that could literally delete the Democratic Party from the November ballot. Like, wow, how does a deeply blue state get to a point where a major party might just completely vanish from the general election? Well, the short answer is that a massive, totally unexpected sex scandal colliding with $6 gas has created this unprecedented political volatility. Let's actually look at the mechanics behind why this lockout is mathematically possible.
To understand this threat, we really have to get how the game is played here. California uses what's called a top two primary system. This means every single candidate, no matter what political party they belong to, is thrown onto one giant unified ballot. And when the votes are finally tallied, only the top two vote getters advance to the general election in November. That's it. It doesn't matter if they're both Republicans or both Democrats, the top two simply take the whole shebang. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at the bigger picture math from this May 2026 polling data, the danger becomes glaringly obvious. We have a dead heat right at the very top. Democrat Xavier Becerra, the former Health and Human Services Secretary, is tied at exactly 18% with Republican political commentator Steve Hilton. And right on their heels, another Republican, Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco, sitting there at 14%. Notice how closely clustered those top numbers are? That cluster is exactly where the structural danger lies for the Democrats. And this right here is an absolute tactical nightmare for the Democratic Party. What started out as a sprawling, chaotic field of 61 candidates, which, let's be honest, is practically the size of a phone book, has narrowed down, sure, but not nearly enough for the left. You've got 5 major Democrats, Becerra, Katie Porter, Tom Steyer, Matt Mahan, and Antonio Villaraigosa, all fracturing their own base. Meanwhile, the Republican vote is heavily consolidated behind just 2 major candidates, Hilton and Bianco. Throw in the fact that 14% of voters are still completely undecided, and you have this massive, glaring vulnerability. If Democrats split their vote 5 ways, those 2 Republicans could easily sweep the top 2 spots. Let's move on to Section 1, the catalyst, specifically the Swalwell vacuum and the Becerra surge. To really grasp the volatility of this race, we have to look at the cause and effect of a single, explosive event that reshaped the entire playing field almost overnight. What's so wild about this timeline is how incredibly fast political fortunes can flip. Back in March 2026, Democrat Eric Swalwell was actually leading the pack at 17%. But then, in mid-April, his campaign completely collapsed following allegations of sexual misconduct. He dropped out, and it created this massive vacuum. The data shows us that Xavier Becerra, who'd just been sitting quietly in the single digits, immediately absorbed Swalwell's voting bloc, specifically those voters looking for someone with a history of aggressively fighting the Trump administration through litigation. By May, Becerra had surged straight to that 18% high we just looked at. Real cause and effect right there. Moving right along to Section 2, the cost of living clash and the $3 gas promise. Because, politics isn't just about scandals and shifting loyalties, right? It's fundamentally about kitchen table economics. And economic anxiety is driving a massive populist surge in this primary. Just look at that number, $6.02. That was the average price for a gallon of gas in California on May 5th, the exact day of the high-stakes CNN debate in Monterey Park. That is roughly $2.50 higher than the national average at the time. It's what frustrated residents across the entire political spectrum are calling the California penalty. And this specific number has become the absolute anchor for the state's economic frustration. And that frustration set the stage for a massive ideological collision. On the right, you have Republican Steve Hilton making a very specific, very aggressive promise. He says he can get gas down to $3 by using executive authority to repeal the state's low-carbon fuel standard and open up drilling. He's basically framing the state's climate agenda as a direct tax on normal, everyday people. But on the other side, the Democratic field pushes back hard. Candidates like Matt Mahan argue that global market forces and geopolitical conflicts are what actually set the prices, while Tom Steyer blames it all on corporate price gouging. So we're seeing a fundamental core disagreement on the root cause of the state's affordability crisis. Which brings us to Section 3, the healthcare litmus test, and how it's fracturing the progressive base. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because economics isn't the only wedge issue keeping the field divided. During that CNN debate, the Democratic infighting totally took center stage. Notice the stark divide here on CalCare, the proposed state-run single-payer healthcare system. You've got Katie Porter showing uncompromising support. Then you have Matt Mahan, who is firmly opposed, pointing to the estimated $392 billion annual cost to the state. But the real viral moment, that happened when Porter pressed the frontrunner Xavier Becerra. Becerra gave this sort of cautious, incremental answer about getting everyone covered with something like Medicare for all. Well, Porter immediately pounced, calling his evasive answer absolutely disqualifying. This single issue right here is exactly what's preventing the Democratic base from unifying behind one leader.
And speaking of the resources needed to capture those fractured, divided voters, take a look at this staggering figure, $132 million. That is the amount billionaire climate activist and Democratic candidate Tom Steyer had spent from his own personal fortune by late April just to carve out his 12% slice of the electorate. Talk about an expensive slice of the pie, right? It brilliantly illustrates the sheer financial weight and the incredibly high stakes of this primary election.
Okay, let's wrap this up with Section 4, what it means for the future, and predicting the final two.
So what does this all mean? Where does all this data, all this infighting, and all this spending actually lead us? Remember, we're not just here to recite the news. We want to interpret it. If history and current polling are any guide, here is my first realistic prediction. Step 1, the fractured Democrats fail to unite in these final weeks. Step 2, the two major Republicans, Hilton and Bianco, hold on to their consolidated basis, capturing at least 32% of the vote combined. Which leads us to Step 3. A historic GOP lockout actually becomes a reality. The math here is just incredibly unforgiving. The combined Republican polling is currently higher than any single Democrat's support, and that bitter infighting over healthcare means the left simply won't consolidate in time. And here is my second prediction regarding those crucial remaining votes. Notice Hilton's dominance among voters over 50, grabbing 24% of that super reliable voting bloc. Steve Hilton is perfectly positioned to capture the lion's share of that remaining 14% of undecided voters. He also shares the lead among independents. Honestly, I'd expect to see this trend continue. Why? Because for the undecided voter in California right now, the immediate everyday shock of $6 gas and the soaring cost of living significantly outweighs long-term climate mandates. His specific messaging is just primed to sweep those voters right up.
Which brings us right back to our kitchen table for the community loop. I want to know your specific opinion on all of this. Steve Hilton says he can get gas down to $3 by scrapping California's climate rules, while Democrats call him a liar for ignoring global markets. So is a cheaper commute worth killing the state's environmental goals, or is Hilton just selling a pipe dream? And given the very real potential for a lockout where no Democrat even makes the final ballot, do you think California's top two primary system is actually democratic, or does it just punish parties for having too many qualified candidates? Drop your predictions in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.
An investment in knowledge pays the best interest, so why not invest in this channel? Click like and subscribe for more.